सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
In this edition of Global Print, dear viewer, I'm going to talk to you about Afghanistan. Now, certainly this is not the first time that I have discussed India-Afghanistan relations on Global Print. But this is a little different. And the reason this is a little different is because it impacts thousands of Afghan students who have been trying to come back to India to resume their studies in Indian universities. But before I tell you more about this, I'd like to make an appeal to you. I would urge you to click on the join button, pay ₹159 and become a subscriber to The Print. It's really not very much money and it gives you access to The Print's free, fair, objective and unhyphenated journalism. You know that you've been helping us, dear viewer, these last several months and years, and I would really urge you to do so because it's through your contribution that The Print is able to continue with its very special brand of journalism. Now, to come back to my column this week on Afghanistan, a few days ago, you'll find it on The Print's website. And the reason I say that this is a little different is because it actually impacts on thousands of Afghan students, about 2,500 of them actually, who have been studying in India for some time. They had all taken admission in Indian universities before COVID. Several hundred had to go back home during COVID. Several stayed back. And then on the 15th of August last year, 2021, as you know, when the Taliban walked into Kabul without firing a shot, everything changed. And one of the things that changed so drastically was the fact that the Indian government cancelled every visa that was on the passport of every Afghan, which meant that that so many of these Afghan students who were in Afghanistan were unable to come back to India to resume their studies. Now, it has been about 15 months since that very drastic decision. The Indian government said at the time that it was doing so out of security considerations. Off the record, officials told me that the agency that was handling Afghan passports and dealing with the Indian embassy in Kabul before August 15, 2021, before last year, before the Taliban walked in, had been broken into, and that several of these passports, the Afghan passports, could have fallen into the wrong hands. By that, these Indian officials indicated that they could have fallen into the hands of the Pakistanis, who could do God knows what with these passports, and that became a serious security risk. But the fact remains that a year or so onwards, the Indian government has decided to reopen its embassy in Kabul. If you remember last year, when all diplomats, as well as other Indian citizens, including some journalists, including my colleague Nanema Basu in The Print, who was in Afghanistan at the time covering the situation, everybody had to come back after the Taliban took the city and the Indian embassy shut down everything. So now a year or so after, the whole cycle has been put in motion again. The Indian embassy has opened a mission in Kabul. Of course, it's not a very big mission. There's no ambassador yet, but there is a deputy chief of mission. It's a small mission, admittedly. But the decision to reopen visas has still not been taken. Now, a few weeks ago, an Afghan student in Vadodara asked External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, this exact same question. He was in Vadodara, and you may know that Dr. Jaishankar has been elected to the Rajya Sabha from Gujarat. So he was asked, he was addressing a gathering where an Afghan student got up and he asked the same question, which is, why is the Indian government not giving visas again to Afghan students? And Dr. Jaishankar replied that there is no question, everybody knows of the enormous goodwill that the Indian government and the Indian people hold in their hearts for Afghans. So this Afghan student said, in that case, why is it that you're not giving visas? To which Dr. Jaishankar replied that there are still security questions operating. Now, he was not very clear what exactly these security concerns or questions or risks were. Were these Afghan students risky still to the Indian government? What was going on? Did they need to have new passports? What is the situation? What if, and a lot of these students, should they now then cancel their studies in Indian universities and take admission in other countries? Neighboring Pakistan, for example, has told the Afghan government that we are willing to give 3,000 scholarships to Afghan students. Now, remember, dear viewer, 21 years ago when the Taliban were ousted after 9/11 by the Americans, and at the time India returned to Afghanistan, one of the things that it tried to do was to regain the trust of its people, because during the first Taliban incarnation from 1996 to 2001, India had been completely kept out of the Afghan game. And one of the ways in which it wanted to regain the trust and the goodwill of the Afghan people was by investing in the next generation, students. So every government worth its salt over the last 21 years gave a lot of, every government in Delhi, I mean, every political party which came to power in Delhi in the last 21 years gave scholarships to Afghan students, mostly male, but also a lot of female students were given scholarships, encouraged to come to India and to study. Now, this was a huge hit. And today, if you go to Afghanistan, and I've been there a few weeks ago, you may have seen some of my stories in the print. If you meet Afghans, they have enormous goodwill and friendship and love and affection for India. In fact, if you say you're from India, it's treated like a talisman. So the question today is that if the Indian government has invested in the Afghan students, in the people of Afghanistan over the last 21 years, what is the reason for this about turn? The Afghanistan ambassador to India, Mr. Farid Mamunzai, who has recently tweeted that he's grateful to the Indian government for the consignment of wheat that has been sent to his country. And as you know, things in his country back home are not that great, because there's a lot of the situation is quite dire, both in terms of food as well as health related matters. So this consignment of wheat that India has sent is a very welcome one, and Mr. Mamunzai has tweeted regarding that. But he also told me, and you can find his quote in an article that I've written on the print, which is that he has also been asking the Indian government, Indian officials, about why they do not reopen the visas for Afghan students, and he has got no answers. In fact, Mr. Mamunzai told me that when the security concerns issue was repeated to him, he said to the Indian officials, perhaps we should send female Afghan students back. At least they will not be a security risk or a security concern. But again, there was a deathly silence that has greeted all his comments. So on the one hand, India sending wheat to Afghanistan, and on the other hand, refusing to reopen visas for the Afghan students. Now, here I'd like to add that several of these Afghans told me about their dire situation because the universities in which they have admission have told them categorically that unless you come back and start studying physically, start attending your classes physically, they will not be able to hold their seats. A lot of the Afghan students are studying on Government of India scholarships, ICCR scholarships, which is the Indian Council for Cultural Relations. But a lot of them are also self-paying. So what that means is that they are paying good money to these private universities in India across the board, whether it's in Gujarat or Punjab or Delhi or Haryana or anywhere in the country, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka. So they're paying good money to these universities, but these universities are now saying that we will not be able to hold your seats if you don't come back physically. But the question is, these students are not able to come back because they're not able to get visas. So flights have resumed between Delhi and Kabul. In fact, now there's often more than one flight a week, almost 2 flights a week. They are carrying cargo from Delhi to Kabul. So a lot of medicines, because a lot of counterfeit medicines that are now ruling the market in Kabul. There's a lot of food stuff that goes from here. But if you look at the planes, they're absolutely empty. There's barely 50 or 75 or less than 100 passengers in a plane, in an aircraft that carries 300 people. And most of these people are Afghan expatriates, which basically means that they do not have Afghan passports. So Afghan nationals with Afghan passports are almost not allowed to come into the country again. That also holds true for a lot of Afghans who had come into India to access medical facilities. And you know, dear viewer, that a lot of the hospitals in Delhi, for example, a lot of the private hospitals were full of Afghan patients. When the Taliban took Kabul and when this great wall fell on the visa question, a lot of these Afghan patients could not come and speak to their doctors, be treated here in India. So they have had to perforce again go back to other countries or be forced to avail of the very limited medical facilities that they have inside Afghanistan. A lot of them have begun to travel to Pakistan next door. So the question is, why is the Indian government doing this? Why would it not reissue visas to Afghan students, Afghan patients who want to access healthcare? This is India's soft power, which is to create better relations, better confidence building measures between countries, between the peoples of countries. And Afghans, as you know, are are amongst India's closest friends. They have had a huge experience, very, very good experiences in India. They take these experiences back home and basically spread the good word about India. So for the Indian government not to reissue visas and to have these Afghan students come back, pick up their studies, invest in their own future again, is really like throwing away with both your hands this soft power that India has garnered these last several decades. I'm going to stop here, but I would encourage you to read my column Global Print on the Print's website, and I do look forward to hearing your comments on this video. Thank you so much for watching.